Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go back a little bit. Okay, welcome to Sharing Nature with Children. So we're going to be talking primarily about the Santa Monica Mountains, which runs through Los Angeles and is basically in the backyard of all of our schools. And the purpose of this class is to teach children about the Santa Monica Mountains, and that we can bring this knowledge into our class. I found that we teach about dinosaurs, we teach about geology, we teach about animals, we teach about plants, but are we teaching about what's in our local area? Or are we just teaching about these subjects in general? Or do our children know more about animals in Africa and in Antarctica than they do of what's in their own backyard? So why is there a national park in the Santa Monica Mountains? This is the largest national recreation area in the United States that is close to a metropolitan area. When we're at Malibu Creek State Park, which is what the last slide was showing, you are 26 miles as a crow flies from downtown Los Angeles, one of the largest cities in the world. We have mountain lions right in the Santa Monica Mountains. The only other major city that has wild big cats that close to their city is Mumbai in India with tigers. So why we have a national park in the Santa Monica Mountains is to provide recreational opportunities for the people in the Los Angeles basin. The people in Los Angeles voted, petitioned, and worked to get this to made a national recreation area. Previously, it was not publicly owned up until the last 30, 40 years, and is to protect one of the last remaining fragments of a global biodiversity hotspot. So what type of climate zone do we live in? Most people that I talk to don't know. So that's something we can tell our kids about. We live in a Mediterranean climate. Now, what's a Mediterranean climate? So here's the Mediterranean Sea. So you can see all of these countries right on the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. California, basically, the west coast of Chile, the southern coast of Africa, and the southern coast of Australia. Now, Mediterranean climate ecosystems are 2.25% of the world land area, but we have 16% of the world plant species. Now, why do we want to protect this? Well, you'll notice that these areas are heavily populated. This is usually places people want to live. They don't want to live in desert areas. They don't want to live in polar areas. We have a lot of that. Temperate, yes, a lot of people want to live in temperate areas, but there's a lot of temperate areas. And very extreme mountainous areas, well, we can't live like everybody can't live up in the Himalayas, can they? So this is a very pleasant place to live. So a lot of people live here. And that means that when people move in, native plants and animals move out. Okay, so why were the western part of the Santa Monicas less developed than the rest of LA? Well, a few reasons. Transportation was hard to get to in the western part of the Santa Monicas. And so in the very early years, and so a lot of people weren't living there. There wasn't that much in between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. So the movie studios saw, aha, we are going to build our backlot here. Back in the 20s and 30s, it was very difficult to be flying people all over the world to have that be their sets. So they would come and make their sets. So Paramount Ranch, Malibu Creek was Fox Studios. There was a lot of studios all through the Santa Monica Mountains. Now Paramount Ranch is burned down. It doesn't look like this anymore. It burned down in the Woolsey fire, and they're wanting to build it back up. So yes, and then also large country clubs. This is Craig's Country Club, which was located in Malibu Creek State Park. And a lot of wealthy people from Santa Barbara, from Los Angeles, built up this, bought all of this land from homesteaders. And they had a private country club there, which basically encompassed all of Malibu Creek. And then also a lot of landowners built large ranches there, like Ronald Reagan had a large ranch, which was eventually purchased by Fox Studios, which was eventually purchased by the State Park, which purchased Fox Studios. But there were a lot of other country clubs in this area. So people bought large parcels of land so they couldn't be developed. So what type of dinosaurs lived in this area? We're going to move to why we were able to have all of those large pieces of land. That's why. So they were protected, so National and State Park could do it. And lots of people bought large ranches. So we didn't become immediately a big part of proper Los Angeles. Okay, what type of dinosaurs lived in this area? We talk about dinosaurs. The dinosaurs that lived here would have had to swim. They'd have all been underwater dinosaurs because the Los Angeles basin was underwater at the time that the dinosaurs lived on the earth. The animals that did live here came in the Ice Age, and you can see those at La Brea tar pits. So let's talk a little bit about geology. So we have some faults here. Now, the Juan de Fuca plate is now underneath the North American plate, but we have the Pacific plate over here. We have the North American plate here, and they meet right here, right at the San Andreas Fault. And the Pacific plate is always kind of going upwards, and the North American plate is pushing downward. You know about these plates. They're kind of floating on top of molten rock is what our crust is. They're not permanently down all the way to the core. They're moving. That's why we have earthquakes. So the Santa Monica Mountains formed by earthquake activity down around San Diego millions of years ago. And then they were pushed up, and the North American plate was pushing down. That caused a lot of volcanic action. The Channel Islands are also part of this plate, and they used to kind of be part of all together, and then they kind of separated out. Anyway, I'm not giving a very good explanation, but that's just to say that we have very interesting geology in this area because there's a lot of sedimentary rock, and then there's a lot of volcanic rock because of all of the plate movements over millions of years. So I can't read all of this. This is showing all of the different rock formations. But what I want you to know is that most of these type are sedimentary rocks. And through here, we have a lot of volcanic rock. And they're kind of all meeting together here in the Santa Monica Mountains. This is one of the most interesting geologic areas in the world. Lots of people will come here to study our geology because of how it was formed. Oh, what happened? Yes, all right, now the next one. So yes, so there are a lot of fossils throughout the mountains. So you know that we were underwater. And this is volcanic rock, which we're going to see this area when we go to Malibu Creek. It's really good for rock climbing. And this is the rock pool at Malibu Creek. And I showed this because I used to rock climb, and you have to do like a bit of horizontal rock climbing through here. And then you have to get over this area without having to fall in the water. It's kind of tricky. And then when you go over here, you can do a lot of rock climbing. Well, you can tell it's volcanic rock because there's not layers. There's all of these little holes where gas pockets were. So Malibu Creek is a big rock climbing area. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about plants in the Santa Monica Mountains. So convergent evolution. Now, do you remember when we showed that slide about all the different Mediterranean climates? So they have plants that are very, very similar. Let's see if I can move this. That are very, very similar to our plants, but not exactly the same. So convergent evolution is the process whereby organisms not closely related independently evolve similar traits as a result of having to adapt to similar environments or ecological niches. So the shrubs in our area that are local, that's not the word I'm trying to think of, but indigenous to this area, are like low-lying shrubs. They have small leathery leaves, and they're mainly evergreen. Not all of them are evergreen, but many of them are evergreen. So let's take a look at some of these plants. Okay, so most of the Santa Monica Mountains is chaparral and coastal sage scrub. And so that's how we get all of these velvet hills that we have. They kind of cover it. And here's a yucca plant in bloom. It's very beautiful, and we're lucky if we see them in the spring. They usually come out a little bit later, but it's also called Our Lord's Candle. And we'll talk more about yucca plants on our hikes. So we're going to learn a lot about the plants that grow in chaparral and coastal sage shrub. Okay, now this is showing the type of vegetation there is. So you can see we have by the coast, you're going to have the bluff scrub or the coastal scrub. This coastal sage scrub is this light green, so you can see there's a whole lot of that. Mixed chaparral. All right, so that's making up a huge amount of the mountains through here. Red shank chaparral is going to be up in the tops of the mountains. So this is up where we get into Sandstone Peak that has chaparral, red shank chaparral up there. It has to have in high elevations usually. Chamise chaparral. Chamise is a very burnable plant. We're going to learn about that. Our coastal cactus shrub. We're not going to see any of that because we're not going to go on the coast. Lots of rock outcroppings. We're going to see a lot when we're at Malibu Creek State Park. Salt marsh near the ocean. Valley oaks, you're going to see that in there. Valley oaks are kind of like these Valley plains area. Coastal live oak is the one that's more prevalent, and we'll see a lot of that. Walnut trees, we'll see some, and then the riparian kind of follows our creeks, and this all becomes the Malibu Creek watershed, and it's all going to go down into the ocean eventually, and we'll see those creeks when we're both at King Gillette and at Malibu Creek State Park. Oh, and here it shows the Backbone Trail. Well, you can't really see it because we do talk about the Backbone Trail also, because you can go from this area all the way over to Will Rogers. Oh, well, now we're at our chaparral, so we'll talk about that. So this is what our chaparral looks like, our velvet hills, and that's 62% of the Santa Monica Mountains is chaparral vegetation. So we have our small leathery leaves, underground storage for long-lasting seeds, very deep roots because of our dry, hot summers. They're usually evergreen. They can be thickets, very hard to get through, impenetrable thickets, and they have heavier, thick-corded seeds so that they can outlast the fire. Okay, so here's some of our plants. So this is our chamise or our greasewood, and it will burn green. So we're going to be seeing a lot of chamise, and there it is in flower, so it's very pretty. And our ceanothus, our big pod ceanothus, note small leathery leaves. And these flowers will turn the hills white, and green bark will turn our hills purple when we have a good year and there's a lot of bloom. And then we have our toyon. So they call it Hollywood berry, which somebody has said that Hollywood was not named after this, but I heard that it was. So I guess it depends on which website you read. They all call it Christmas berry because it comes out at Christmas time and it's very decorative and pretty. And this is a very popular plant in the chaparral. Okay, scrub oak. You'll find scrub oak. You can see that this is an oak tree that's just very bushy, and its leaves are very holly and pointy. And we're going to, well, you see scrub oak in the chaparral, but you also see a lot of it in coastal sage scrub or shrub, which brings us to our coastal sage scrub, which is 23% of the Santa Monica Mountains. And so you can see it's not as dense, it's not as thick. You can kind of walk through this a little bit. All right, so the coastal sage scrub vegetation, shorter, it's whiter, greener leaves, lots of sage. During droughts, it will lose its leaves. The flowers definitely lose its smell. It is deciduous. It does smell fabulous. Lightweight leaves, soft leaves are not going to be as heavy and thick as our chaparral leaves. And we'll see a big difference when we go to Serenia Park, because that's a coastal sage scrub area and not a chaparral area that we see in King Gillette. Okay, so here's a very good example. You can see much shorter plants, easier to walk through. You don't need trails as much when you're going through the coastal sage scrub if you're adventurous, easier to bushwhack. Okay, so here's some California buckwheat. And again, we saw California buckwheat when we're at King Gillette Ranch, but we're also going to see a lot of that at Serenia Park. The plants don't know exactly where they should be, so they're going all over the place. But you're going to see more of them in a coastal sage scrub. And we're going to see monkey flower, hopefully, in our coastal sage scrub. You also see it down in wetter areas. You'll see a lot of like stream monkey flower when you get down by the creeks and they're running. Black sage, we've seen. Bush sunflower, we'll see a lot of that at Serenia Park. And I don't know if I have one of purple sage, but we see black and purple sage both at King Gillette and at Serenia Park. Okay, so riparian woodland, only 2%. And our streams are usually just running in the spring. A lot of our streams that are running year round are just runoff from, those signs that say, watch out, drains to creek, don't dump. So, but when we get a lot of rain, then this place can look like Hawaii. These streams will be running really, really high. So this is where it's going to be really shady, nice to go and hike in these places in the summer. You're going to get a lot of, I can't remember the name. You're going to get sycamore trees. And it says it's not restricted to Mediterranean climates. So a lot of these trees would be seen in other places too. Now you're going to get your large leaves. You're going to get your bigger flowers. Okay, so this is our canyon sunflower, different than bush sunflower because it has a yellow center. So your canyon sunflower has a Y in yellow, like canyon has a Y. And your bush sunflower has a brown center because brown starts with B, like bush. So we'll see these. We'll see some canyon sunflower when we're in Malibu Creek. And of course, corridors for wildlife movement because they're going to look for where the water is. So there's the sycamore tree that I love. It's so beautiful with that gorgeous bark. And they usually grow near water. And they survive. They're wonderful. And they have great big leaves. So mule fat, this is the plant I was thinking of earlier, but there's another one that it'll come to me. These often will grow near streams. And isn't that beautiful? So the Humboldt lily. And you've probably never heard of Alexander Humboldt. That's a whole story unto itself, but a lot of things are named after him and most people haven't even heard of him. But anyway, so these are really quite large. Most of the flowers in the Santa Monica Mountains are pretty small. We probably won't come across any of those, but these are the kind of flowers you can get in the stream areas. So the oak woodland, 4%. So you see, you get a lot of grassy area and you'll get really big oak trees in this area, which we have seen. And we'll see some oak woodland when we're at Malibu Creek. And we saw some oaks also at King Gillette Ranch, but no oaks at Serenia Park. So, and I thought it's interesting. It says type of oak species depends on depth to groundwater and also the size of the oaks. A lot of depends on how much water they're getting, not necessarily how old they are. And yes, oak trees are incredibly important to wildlife and to people. And we have seen that even when they're dead, they're very important to wildlife. So here's our coastal live oak, and they're big and you don't see their infrastructure very well. And there's their leaves that look like little boats because they're coastal. They're not really, they're not necessarily on the coast, but since the name says coastal, I think of them as little boats. So here's our valley oak, and you can see it doesn't grow around as many other oaks. It has those lobed leaves and it is deciduous, so you will see its structure, but even when the leaves are on, you see a little bit more of its structure. They're really magnificent trees. So grasslands, just 4%. And as I mentioned earlier, these are dominated by non-native species. So they're actually kind of a problem. And there you see a lot of mustard in the front. So that's non-native. These are all non-native. Most of our grasslands are non-native. And that makes it difficult for seeds to take root. And they also cause a lot of fire. It's probably fire up there in the background that's going off of all of that non-native grass. It grows quickly, it burns quickly, and it's great fuel for fire. Okay, so what have we learned about our plants? There is incredible diversity, over 1,800 different species. The majority of the diversity is in annual plants, and fire plays a large role. Why does fire play a large role? These plants are used to fire, just not as much fire as we usually have. That's a larkspur. So pretty. The flowers are teeny tiny, but when you get a lot of them together, they're just gorgeous. Okay, so 99% of all fires are human caused. We do have fire adopted communities. There isn't great interaction between fire and non-native species. It's causing more fire. And as I mentioned before, they can survive fire for about every 20 years or 25 years, but not every 5 years. It's hard for them to regrow that quickly. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about animals. So we have a lot of native animals here. So it's a bobcat. And there's our mountain lion hiding in the grass. A coyote and a skunk and a mule deer. And is that a wood rat? I think that's our wood rat. So here's our mountain lion. A lot of them are collared. They're tracked. We raise a lot of money for mountain lions. As one fellow said, he goes, we can't get money for mule because they're not as sexy as a mountain lion. But it's a problem. They're having a big bridge being built in Agora because mountain lions need lots of space and they shouldn't interbreed because it brings in sick mountain lions. And so we're trying to give them a chance to kind of roam, and they're landlocked by freeways. So it is a problem with mountain lions, but we would like to keep them. They're important for the biodiversity of this area. Coyotes are very prevalent and they're very adaptable to living within cities. So sometimes you'll even see coyotes wandering the streets of the cities. There's coyotes all over LA, and they also track them, and they can so they can see how much they're moving and where they're going. Red-tailed hawks are very prevalent, and you usually see quite a few red-tailed hawks flying over our Santa Monica Mountains open area. We also have kites, white kites, lots of turkey vultures. There's a large variety of birds. And I'm not as good with birds as I am with plants. I tried, but they keep moving. And it's hard to see them because they move and they fly around and they're high up in the trees. Okay, yes, we have rattlesnakes. We have many other snakes. And I mean, the snakes are good. They keep down the rodent population. And you probably will not get bit by a snake as long as you stay on the trails. And if you hear a rattle, don't go looking for it. I had one class, I take my classes for hikes, and the parents are saying, we hear a rattle, we hear a rattle. I go, no, there's no rattle. Let's move along. Let's move along. They're walking in to try to find the rattlesnake. And the kids are going in to find the rattlesnakes. Like, no, you don't do that. When we're with a bunch of kids, we say, okay, we heard a rattle. That's wonderful. Let's move along. Let's move along. Let's move along. And if you see a rattle on the path, you just wait a while and it will slither away. So you don't need to be afraid of the rattlesnakes as long as you stay on the trails. Lots of rabbits, and the rabbits kind of feed all the other animals. They're sort of at the bottom of the chain, poor little rabbits, but there's cute, and there's a lot of them. I live in Conejo Valley, which means Rabbit Valley, and there's still a lot of them around. You see them hopping around. Okay, so without your help, the plants and animals will lose. Your inspiration and education of the people of Southern California matters. Understanding, caring equals action. If not here, then nowhere. Learn stewardship here influences actions, votes, and dollars. Everyone deserves the fun, peace, relaxation, enjoyment of our national parks. The plants and animals thank you. And that's what our national park people tell you. And I want to end with this. It would be no small advantage if every college were located at the base of a mountain. Some will remember, no doubt, not only that they went to college, but that they went to the mountain, by Henry David Thoreau. Well, all of our schools are located near the base of mountains. I hope that our children, I'm getting teary-eyed because this is something I believe in. I hope that the children that we teach will know, not only did we teach them to read and to write and to do everything else, but we taught them about the mountains. See you on a trail.